Welcome again to the Writer Review. This is Eric Skeritt, writer, and this week we're going to be taking a look back at the 1997 movie Contact. Now, Contact is a sci-fi drama film. It is directed by Robert Zemeckis. It is also produced by Robert Zemeckis and Steve Starkey. The script was done by James Hart and Michael Goldenberg, based on the novel Contact by the legendary late great astronomer himself, Dr. Carl Sagan. The score was done by Alan Silvestri, the cinematography by Don Burgess, and the editing was done by Arthur Schmidt. And it's got a cesspool of great talented actors here in this movie as well. Such names include Jodie Foster, Matthew McConaughey, James Woods, John Hurt, Tom Skeritt, Angela Bassett, Rob Lowe, and Jake Busey, and plus also some archive footage from the president back then, Mr. Bill Clinton. The year 1997 was truly a year that every movie below sea level, get it, to the classic blockbuster Titanic. But one of the more captivating, spiritually enhanced films that came out in that time period was Contact. Under the careful eyes of longtime director Robert Zemeckis, Contact tells the exhilarating story of a brilliant astronomer played by Jodie Foster as she goes on a trivializing quest in search of other living things that go beyond our earthly bubble, as she spreads the word that we are not alone in the universe. Of course, you know, it doesn't come easy, you know, with the threats of her space project under financial situations to keep the thing going, and to the fact that skeptics alike also seem to play a pivotal role, as higher echelons, politicians, even religious denominations also have this skepticism that there is life on other planets. Others are so fanatic about it that they've often accused Jodie Foster's character, Dr. Ellie Arroway, of committing the act of blasphemy. Dr. Arroway, played by Jodie Foster, is our protagonist, and she is quite obsessed with finding this difficult and will stop at nothing to fulfill the question many of us have asked but never got the concrete answers to. Through all the details in this story, there are a plethora of deeper inner issues in Ellie's quest to search for extraterrestrial beings. In the end of her never-ending quest to find the unknown, we can look at her iconic rebel caused by a global spectacle. From a very early age, Ellie has been fascinated with astronomy. We have learned that her mother died when she was very young, and she remained very close to her father, David Morse, who died while he and a young Ellie, played by Jenna Malone, were watching a meteor shower fall down upon them. This was probably her calling card, as she had an epiphany that someday she will contact these extraterrestrials in hopes to finally convince humankind that there is more than meets the eye. Being somewhat iconoclastic in nature, in one of the flashbacks, we discover that the young Ellie, instead of praying to God like most people who are religious, Ellie actually tries to reach her deceased father, and not from seances or prayers or psychic telepathy, but through her transistor radio, to see if she can contact him through there, believing that maybe when you die, you don't go to heaven, you go outside our Earth, and that maybe the extraterrestrial is probably the afterlife. We're kind of led to believe that in this metaphoric sense, Ellie believes that her father is no longer on this Earth, but probably at another planet, and that the extraterrestrials are not really aliens, but probably reincarnates of our deceased relatives. That's kind of like the impression I get. Whereas the religious people pray for their parents in heaven, Ellie depends more on technological apparatuses as a spiritual guide beyond the grave. Her sadness is conveyed in the same format as our prayers when we go to church, but with technology as her escape from the cruelty of separation, we can conclude that her grief is somewhat correlative to those who pray religiously. I mean, let's face it, she's an atheist. She doesn't believe in God. But she does believe that maybe the hereafter is through space. By that, we can learn a lot from Ellie's reaching out to her deceased father, by which, putting faith in God, we can refrain from our fixations of greed and vanity, and to appreciate the things that God has done for us. Appreciate the things that He has given us to as a gift, as the gift of life, to provide us with the stuff that we use today. I mean, if it wasn't for God, where would we be? There's a lot of subliminal messages and a lot of food for thought here in this movie. As Ellie's project SETI was about to be terminated after not really finding any proof of alien life, Ellie hurries to higher profit moguls to desperately continue her search to contact her late father. After being turned down by several corporations, Ellie finally finds the reassurance from an eccentric multi-millionaire named S.R. Haddon, played by John Hurt. And he was also, and he was an eccentric multi-millionaire, gladly took into her funding so that her project could be up and running. Throughout the course of time, she was turned down. You know, every time she starts talking about her dreams, people saying that this is not the work of science but science fiction, in one of the memorable quotes. But then she also comes up with a lot of very compelling, inspiring, intellectual responses by saying that, hey look, people laughed when they invented the wheel. People laughed when we made up inventions where we learned to fly. Or stuff like that, you know. She kind of makes, you know, a lot of valid points here. This movie is definitely not the traditional science fiction movie, you know, where aliens land, you know, go on a hostile takeover, and then you gotta grab your laser pistols and you start shooting. No, it's not like that at all. In fact, I don't really consider this movie to be science fiction, but more like science realism, because for a sci-fi movie, this movie is about as real as it gets. You're not going to see little green men There's no hostile takeover. There's no epic war going on. If there is an epic war, it's Ellie and her SETI team taking down the bureaucrats and trying to prove to them that there is life on other planets, and to try to make them overcome their ignorance in many shapes or forms that we find depicted in this movie. Although her presentation has lots of accurate details, she gets rejected numerous times because her research seems way over the top as science fiction. In other words, her vision just doesn't fit the criteria like other people. It's like they've heard the same speech but told differently 100 times before. They can't find something in Ellie's speech that has any bite to them. She eventually gets the funding once it gets across towards those who are able to listen and to understand her, who don't have the same intentions like she does. It raises the attention to the higher corporate echelons, especially her chief executive officer, played by Tom Skeritt. After Ellie travels to space to get some evidence, she eventually, has a vision. And her vision is she is on a paradise island. And she sees her late father. She talks to him. They embrace in a conversation, and then she's come back to Earth. And she eventually has to tell the world that maybe the world is not ready to listen to her story. So eventually she lies by saying that there is no alien life. Or maybe people just don't know how to handle the truth or can't handle the truth. When forced to ask some heavy-handed questions from the National Inquiry, she can only conclude through her factual technical information similar to cultural belief, and then we can conclude by saying that a claim is nothing more than a simple hypothesis. For the first time in her life, she can open up and claim that her research was not experienced through science, but through the facets of faith. And that's pretty remarkable when you think about it. Her heartfelt speech in the end can be a statement from a Christian missionary. The language through her speech shows an incredible force from the experience that Ellie went through. And sure, her scientific beliefs are contrary to our long, tiring search to find the truth beyond our Earth. There's something that keeps her from going out to spread the truths about our universe. However, one thing's for sure, we are all messengers to God. We are all His children, and we all have tales to tell of God's generous, loving, and caring persona. If I was to give this movie a scale out of 10, it's definitely a 9 out of 10. There's a lot of subliminal messages involving both science and religion, and they both seem to tend to coexist and correlate quite spectacularly here. I mean, Ellie's communication to her deceased father through her ham radio is not any much different than when a Christian or a Jewish person or a Muslim, when they go to their houses of the holy and they pray. It's not really that much different. Sure, Ellie is an atheist, and that to her, science is what's the real proof behind our universe. But still, religion and science tend to coexist quite well. Sure, there are a few fanatics in this movie, like Jake Busey's character, who seems to somewhat almost look like a caricature. I think if there was a real weakness in that movie, that would have been his performance. But he was only on very briefly, so that didn't really hinder the movie too much. In the end, it's a fascinating movie. It's definitely not for the lame-brained, but for those who are really intellectually minded. I would strongly suggest you to go see this movie. It's a good one. You know, it's good for DVD. It's good to rent. You should check it out. But I guess this ends my writer review. Thank you all for listening in. Please subscribe to my channel if you like. Leave a comment below. Remember, be kind, be courteous, and I will be back again with another movie review. So until next time, this is Skeritt Writer saying, take care of yourselves, keep watching those movies, and I'll see you around. Goodbye.